The rooftop was silent, not because the music had stopped or the city had quieted, but because everyone had heard what he said. "You add no value, Celise." The guests didn't gasp. They didn't speak. They just watched her, and she didn't move. Have you ever stood next to someone you loved, someone you helped build, only to realize they never saw you standing there at all? Have you ever been erased without being touched? If you've ever been called less than, extra, replaceable, or worthless by someone who once said they couldn't do life without you, this story is for you. Because tonight, she walked away, but not in defeat. She walked away in silence, and came back an empire. The Larkspur Hotel rooftop was made of glass and nerve. It curved like ambition against the Manhattan skyline, glittered with moneyed smiles and shallow applause. Everyone wore the same smug calm, until she arrived. Celise Winter didn't wear revenge on her face. She wore white silk, simple, sharp, clean. It was a private celebration, or so Callan said. No press, no branding, no press release, just a curated list of donors and executives who believed in his genius. He stood tall in a charcoal jacket, shaking hands with men who'd called him boy 5 years ago and now called him visionary. His wife stood beside him, quiet, observant, patient. And when a woman in emerald asked, "What does your wife do?" Callan laughed lightly and said, "She enjoys the view." Celise smiled, small, measured, but her fingers curled slowly around her glass. No one noticed. Because men like Callan always thought grace was the same as weakness. That silence meant agreement, that a woman who didn't speak in boardrooms must not know what they were worth. The rain had been teasing all night. Soft gusts of wind brushed her skin, and somewhere far below, the city kept moving, like it didn't know a woman was having her whole life redrawn in real time. Callan leaned close, not with love, with something colder. "You add no value, Celise." She didn't blink, didn't cry, didn't ask him to explain. He had said it the way he delivered bad code reviews, clinical, detached, indifferent, like she was a miscalculated line in his success script, like she was in the way. She looked at him, then looked past him. There were no second chances in his eyes, only vanity, only strategy. So she turned. She walked across the rooftop. She passed stunned assistants, flustered interns, secretaries who admired her but never said it out loud. She didn't grab her coat. She didn't take a purse. She didn't wait for the elevator. She walked, and not one person stopped her, not even him. 2 years earlier, Callan Dravon lived in a second-floor apartment that smelled like fried rice and ambition. He couldn't afford AC. He slept on a mattress without a frame. His fridge had 1 expired bottle of ginger dressing and half a protein bar. Celise showed up every Saturday. She didn't bring groceries. She brought questions. Why is your user retention curve falling after day 3? Your login flow has friction. Why not skip email verification at MVP? He had once kissed her in the middle of a fight, not because she was wrong, but because she was right, and it scared him. She wasn't there for his charm. She was there because she believed in code that changed lives, and because she believed in him. She built his first investor pitch deck, rewrote his cold emails, even corrected his spelling mistakes. He called her his good luck charm, and when he got his first seed round, he didn't put her on the cap table. He said, "I'll make it up to you." The elevator doors shut, and for the first time in a long time, Celise Winter didn't feel like a placeholder. She felt like a fuse. Below her, the city roared. Above her, the glass cracked just a little more, with the weight of unspoken words. But inside her, something had already detonated. The elevator smelled like orchids and marble. It always did. Larkspur didn't do cheap. It didn't do anything that didn't photograph well. But Celise didn't look at the flowers. She stared at her own reflection in the gold-paneled wall. Not sad, not angry, just done. Her heels made no sound as she crossed the empty lobby. The doorman recognized her. He started to say something, but her eyes told him not to. He nodded instead and opened the door. The night air hit her like a reset button. She didn't wait for the valet. She walked to the corner, raised her hand, and stepped into the first cab that stopped. No destination, just movement. She sat in the back seat, folded her hands in her lap, and exhaled. It wasn't the insult that undid her. It was the ease with which he said it, like her years of patience meant nothing, like her sacrifices were background noise, like the only value she ever had was proximity, and now even that wasn't needed. 2 years ago, she'd seen him pacing around a cracked apartment floor, laptop crashing every time he tried to load his prototype. He'd called her in tears once because an investor ghosted him. She brought him orange juice and an Ethernet cable. She was the one who told him to switch from enterprise licensing to a freemium model. She explained why market fit mattered more than pitch polish. He hadn't even known how to calculate CAC properly. Now he stood with $100 million grin and looked at her like she was a decorative plant someone forgot to water. She opened her purse and pulled out a folded note. Handwritten. Simple. No flourish. I'd rather be invisible building something than silent while you erase me. It had taken her 10 seconds to write, and 2 years to mean it. By the time the cab reached her block, she had already sent the email to her lawyer. No messy separation, no press statements. She didn't want alimony. She didn't want shares. She wanted freedom. That was the only currency that mattered now. She unlocked her old apartment, still leased in her name, still quiet, still hers. The furniture was dusty, but the silence felt honest. She plugged in her laptop, made tea, and opened the prototype file that had been sitting untouched for a year. The last thing he'd said about it echoed in her head. Nice idea, babe. But it's too small to scale. She stared at the code. She whispered, "Watch me." No pitch deck, no funding, no media. Just a concept she couldn't let go of. An app designed for minority women in business. Not influencers, not token founders. Real women, self-taught, overlooked, under-mentored. An ecosystem where they could connect, learn, and receive micro-grants and mentorship. She called it Rise L, not after herself, but after the idea that women like her mother, like her cousin, who got passed over for 3 jobs, deserved more than empty praise. They deserved infrastructure. The early days were brutal. She worked part-time remote contracts to pay rent. She coded at night. She hosted small workshops on weekends, in borrowed rooms and underfunded libraries. Some nights, only 3 women showed up. Some days, the app crashed. Users left nasty reviews. She cried once, in the bathroom of a WeWork, with paper towels pressed against her face so she wouldn't ruin her only good blouse. But every time she wanted to quit, she remembered his voice. "You add no value, Celise." That sentence became fuel. She started handwriting thank you notes to every new user. She answered support tickets herself. When a single mom emailed her saying, "Your grant helped me buy a printer and apply to 5 contracts," Celise printed it out and taped it above her screen. She didn't need everyone. She needed someone. And slowly, someone's started showing up. 200 users in the first month. By the 3rd month, she crossed 40,000. The tipping point came when a teenager made a TikTok praising the app's clean design and no weird startup bro vibes. It went viral. Suddenly, her inbox was flooded. Journalists, seed funders, influencers, sponsorship deals, tech blogs. She ignored most of them, but one email caught her attention. A woman named Delira Naive, founder of a fintech startup Celise, once admired quietly in her old apartment. She didn't offer a check. She offered her time, mentorship, guidance, weekly strategy calls. That's what Celise said yes to. When Rise-L crossed 1 million users, people started calling her a surprise disruptor. She laughed at that term. Nothing about her disruption was a surprise to the women who'd lived unseen for decades. But still, the narrative followed her. So, she let it. If being underestimated opened the door, she'd walk through and take others with her. It was around that time she met him. Not Callan. Kaya. He wasn't rich. He wasn't loud. He didn't wear ego like a necktie. He was a legal consultant volunteering at a small startup legal aid clinic. They crossed paths at a Saturday workshop she was hosting. He asked sharp, respectful questions. When her prototype bugged out in front of 20 users during a live demo, she panicked. He leaned over from his seat, saw the issue in her console, and typed 3 quiet lines of code without saying a word. The bug was gone. He sat back down like nothing happened. Later, when she offered to buy him coffee as thanks, he refused, but he remembered her order the next time they met. She noticed how he listened to every woman in the room like their words mattered. Not performatively, just naturally. The third time they ran into each other, it was raining. She'd forgotten her umbrella. He walked with her for 6 blocks without trying to impress her. When she reached her building, he didn't try to come up. He just said, "You built something that gives other women what you never had." She didn't know what to say. So she said the truth. "Yes, and I'll never let anyone take that away." In that moment, she realized something. Callan had looked at her and only seen what she wasn't. Kaya looked at her and saw what she'd become. The rain kept falling. But this time, she didn't feel alone in it. The next morning didn't begin with fireworks. It began with tea, silence, and an old laptop that still ran slower than it should. Celise sat at her desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The apartment around her was dim. No curated lighting, no glass walls overlooking the skyline. Just her, in worn cotton pajamas, blinking at a screen that asked for too much. She opened the Rizel prototype again. Half of it still didn't work. The chat feature glitched. The onboarding emails weren't firing properly. The grant application form redirected to the wrong landing page. She hadn't coded properly in months, not since she was managing Callan's schedule, and planning his launch event while simultaneously being left off the guest list. But now she had time, and no one to ask permission from. She spent the entire day debugging, tweaking, editing, rewriting lines of code, with a half-eaten protein bar and tea that went cold twice. She didn't look at her phone. She didn't check the news. At 2:12 a.m., she hit save and whispered, "There you are." The home page loaded clean. The forms worked. The colors were slightly off, but it looked alive, and more importantly, it felt like hers again. She pushed back from her desk, leaned her head against the chair, and closed her eyes. Her inbox was still full of unread junk from Callan's people. She hadn't blocked him yet. Not because she was interested, but because seeing his name in bold letters reminded her why she had to finish what she started. 3 nights later, she hosted a small workshop in a rented community room in Bed-Stuy. Only 9 women showed up. A few were fresh out of college. A couple had babies in strollers. One wore a delivery uniform, clearly still on the clock. They all looked tired, but they also looked curious. She told them the truth. "I don't have $1 million grant to give you, not yet, but I have something better than noise. I have access." She walked them through how Rizel worked, how to find resources, pitch decks, peer mentors. She showed them how to apply for her microgrants, funded out of her own savings for now, and how they'd get not just money, but someone to walk with them through it. No applause. No cheers. But one woman came up after, holding her baby on her hip. Her eyes were glassy. "No one's ever asked me what I wanted to build. Thank you." Celise nodded, and when the woman left, she turned around and wiped her face quickly. Not because she was sad, because something cracked inside her, and it wasn't pain this time. It was recognition. She belonged here, not as someone's shadow, but as someone shaping light. The next few weeks were a blur. She updated the user interface, fixed bugs, and onboarded the first 100 users personally. She hosted video calls, answered help requests herself, and rejected 2 marketing agencies who wanted to make it trendier. She didn't want trendy. She wanted trusted. Then one day, without warning, it happened. A teenager on TikTok posted a 5-minute review of Rizel. Sitting on her bedroom floor, hoodie on, messy bun, she said, "This app is built different. No BS. No trying to sell me stuff. Just real support. No creepy vibes. Whoever made this, thank you." Overnight, Rizel gained 10,000 users, then 30,000 more. By the end of the week, they had to pause new registrations just to fix the servers. Celise didn't sleep much. She barely ate. But she kept going. Her inbox exploded. Investment offers, media requests, sponsorship deals. Most wanted her to sign fast. They used words like buzz, momentum, first mover advantage. She wasn't interested in being a buzzword. She was building a lifeline. One email stood out. It was simple. The subject line, "You built what I wished existed 10 years ago." The sender, Delira Naive, founder of Kinfolk Capital, one of the few black women leading a multi-million-dollar investment firm on the East Coast. Her message was only 4 lines. "You don't need a check. You need someone who knows what this takes. Let's talk. I don't want in, I want beside Delira." Celise scheduled the call immediately. They didn't talk numbers. They talked vision. Delira asked about her users, her pain points, her core values. At the end of the call, she said, "You're building something most of these men don't even understand yet. I'll walk with you. Weekly check-ins, strategy. And when you're ready to scale, I'll help you do it right." Celise didn't cry, but that night she whispered to herself in bed, "This is what real partnership feels like." Meanwhile, Callan's face was still on billboards. He was still giving keynotes, still shaking hands at galas she wasn't invited to. But in every photo, she noticed something strange. His eyes weren't proud. They were tired. And in the comments of his latest press appearance, someone had written, "Where's the wife?" She was the quiet one, but I remember she was sharp. The words shouldn't have mattered, but they did, not for ego, for closure, because someone else saw her, even if only briefly. One evening, after a long day of team calls and user onboarding, Celise stood in front of her bathroom mirror, tying her hair up. She didn't wear makeup these days. She didn't have time for press kits or photo shoots. But she looked at herself and said out loud, "You did good today." And for the first time in a long time, the voice in her head didn't argue back. She believed it. She meant it. 2 days later, her phone rang with a number she hadn't saved, but still recognized. She let it go to voicemail. No games, no drama. She just didn't need it anymore, because she wasn't the wife trying to be seen. She was the woman making others visible. And that was worth more than any rooftop view. Have you ever helped build someone's dream, only to be left behind once it came true? If you've ever been told you didn't matter, that you added no value, don't forget Celise Winter. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She walked. And when the world stopped looking for her, she built something worth finding. If this story speaks to something you've felt, comment "I see you" below, and let someone else know they're not invisible. Like, share, subscribe, because the ones they dismiss are usually the ones they fear will rise without them. The first time Celise Winter saw Callan Dravon, he was swearing at his laptop in a broken folding chair, surrounded by empty Red Bull cans and rejection emails. His apartment was a mess. He was late on rent, and the only light came from his overheating monitor and a cracked window that let in more noise than air. But he was brilliant. Not the kind of brilliance you see in polished speeches or founder bios. The messy, unfiltered kind. The kind that breaks things just to rebuild them better. She stood at the edge of his studio apartment with a takeout bag in one hand and a USB drive in the other. He didn't notice her at first. He was too deep in the weeds, yelling at his code like it owed him money. "Your else if logic is looping your login timeout," she said casually. He turned around fast, blinking. "What?" She walked in like she'd been there 100 times, dropped the bag on his desk, and plugged the USB into his laptop. "Chicken rice. You didn't eat today." "I'm working." "You're crashing," she replied, sitting on the bed that doubled as a couch. He clicked open the USB. Inside, a cleaned-up version of his prototype and a draft of his business model with grammar fixes, user flow diagrams, and a few handwritten notes. "I thought you were a data analyst," he said slowly. "I am. But bad data starts with bad design. You had a good idea. It was buried under ego and spaghetti code." He stared at her. Then he smiled. That was their first real moment. They weren't dating yet, not officially. But the rhythm began that night. He worked. She rewrote. He pitched. She prepared. He dreamed. She structured. It was unspoken but understood. He was the voice in the room. But her fingerprints were on everything he said. Callan had ideas, ambition, and charisma, but no strategy, no funding, and no way to explain his product without stumbling. Celise gave it shape. She wasn't flashy. She didn't chase credit, but she cared about clean systems, impact, and truth. While he read pitch decks on charisma and hockey stick growth, she read the terms of service on funding platforms and studied audience retention metrics. He had 2 failed attempts behind him when they met, 2 startups that didn't scale, both because he thought charisma alone would carry him. She didn't flatter him. She challenged him. "Don't tell me what your app could do," she'd say. "Tell me what problem it solves today." He'd groan, toss a pen across the room, pace for 20 minutes, and then rewrite the whole thing. She helped him craft the pitch that landed his first in-person investor meeting. He almost missed it. Overslept. Bad alarm. Dead phone. She called an Uber from her phone, picked him up, handed him coffee, and ironed his shirt in the back seat with a travel steamer. By the time they got to the co-working lobby, he looked composed. He shook hands like a man with a plan. The investor liked him, but it was Celise who stayed behind after the meeting and casually dropped a line about how his revenue projections were actually lowballing retention churn. The investor raised a brow. "Are you with the company?" Celise smiled. "I'm just the analyst," she said. 2 weeks later, they got their first check. $10,000. Enough to launch a beta. Enough to hire a designer. Enough to breathe. Callan kissed her on the rooftop of their building that night. The city flickered around them, and he whispered, "I couldn't have done this without you." He meant it. Back then, he meant it. She didn't ask for credit. She didn't need a title. Her joy came from watching the dream take shape. She quit her lowest-paying client and worked part-time hours just to help him organize the launch. She wrote his entire terms and conditions. She built the user onboarding flow. She managed the first customer support queries. She edited his newsletter drafts. Callan started calling her his secret weapon, but he never said it publicly, not once. At demo days, she sat in the back. When journalists came to interview him, she stayed in the bedroom so the apartment looked like it belonged only to him. He told her not to confuse the brand. He said investors didn't want to see a CEO founder couple thing, that it looked unstable, risky. She believed him, because at the time, she thought that helping him rise meant learning when to disappear. Until one night, in their apartment, they got the call that would change everything. A well-known VC firm wanted in, $500,000 seed round, press coverage, major attention. Callan celebrated with champagne. Celise stared at the contract. Her name wasn't on it, not even as an advisor. "Where am I in this?" she asked quietly. He wrapped an arm around her and said, "Babe, you know it's yours too. It's just paperwork. You and me, we're bigger than names." She nodded. But the next morning, she started reading about silent partners, about rights, about equity splits. She said nothing, but the silence inside her started shifting. That week, the product officially launched. The app blew up overnight. Praise, downloads, media buzz. Callan gave a TEDx talk. She helped him write it. He forgot to thank her at the end. That hurt more than anything, because she knew he didn't forget. He just chose not to say it. After that, things moved fast. The apartment changed. The circles changed. The clothes changed. The tone changed. He started calling her low-key. She didn't fit his new narrative. Polished founder, press darling, bold disruptor. She still wore practical clothes. Still avoided the spotlight. Still preferred back-end data work over polished pitches. One night, at a private dinner hosted by a VC in Tribeca, someone asked what Celise did. Before she could open her mouth, Callan answered, "She keeps me grounded." Everyone laughed. She smiled, but something inside her flickered. Later that night, in the car, she asked him why he said that. "You didn't need the spotlight, right?" He said, "You always said you were happy building from the back." She nodded, then looked out the window, and whispered, "I did, but I never said I didn't exist." That conversation ended in silence, and that silence kept growing. When his app hit its first $10 million valuation, he threw a rooftop party at the Larkspur. That was the first time she realized something had shifted permanently. She was listed as +1. Not partner, not wife, just +1. She stood in that crowd, sipping sparkling water, watching people shake his hand and say his name with praise. She watched him stand under the glowing logo that she helped name, surrounded by men in tailored blazers who wouldn't even look her in the eye. That's when it hit her. They didn't ignore her because she was unimportant. They ignored her because he did. And if the man she built everything with couldn't see her, then she had to stop building for him. The next morning, she emailed herself an old folder, one she'd kept tucked away for months. It was labeled Rise L, Concept V1, and that was the first real step toward everything that came after. Celeste didn't open the folder for a week. She kept telling herself it wasn't time, that maybe she was just hurt. Maybe things with Callan would settle. Maybe once the product scaled further, once the press attention died down, he'd return to who he used to be. But deep down, she knew better. The old Callan, the man who once watched her give an entire lecture on database segmentation with stars in his eyes, was gone. Or maybe he had only existed for as long as he needed her. The file stayed in her inbox like a line drawn in sand. She opened it on a Tuesday morning, while Callan was still asleep in their new penthouse. Sweet with floor-to-ceiling windows and blackout curtains that never opened. Rise L, Concept V1. She stared at the wireframe for a long time. The design was clunky, the font outdated, the logic flow half-baked, but the heart of it still beat under the surface. It was the app she wished she'd had years ago, when she was alone, underpaid, overqualified, and tired of smiling through boardroom conversations she was never invited to finish. An app that didn't ask women to perform perfection, that offered resources without ego, mentorship without strings, and funding without humiliation. She made one small update that morning. Then another. She changed the font, cleaned the interface, rewrote the mission statement. It felt like breathing again. Callan came home that evening annoyed. A VC firm pulled out of a secondary deal. He ranted for 20 minutes about the press, about numbers, about how no one understood what it took to carry a brand on your back. Celeste listened, then asked gently, "Do you want help revising the growth report?" He waved her off. "I'm not looking for advice. I've got it covered." She nodded. She didn't offer again. That was the moment it became clear. He didn't see her as part of the build anymore. She was part of the furniture. Useful once, now outdated. That weekend, she was invited to a private founders' brunch by a fellow woman in tech she'd met years ago. Someone who had once sat beside her in a dusty co-working space while they both waited for their code to compile. Celeste debated going. Callan had a press event scheduled. He wanted her to attend, not because he needed her input, because he wanted the image. Perfect wife. Poised, present, quiet. She chose the brunch, and for the first time in a long time, she felt seen. The women there didn't care about who her husband was. They cared about her experience, her ideas, her thoughts on policy, platform bias, and mentorship networks. One of them asked about Rise L. She was surprised anyone remembered. "I still think about it," the woman said. "That app could have saved me a lot of pain early on." Celeste smiled softly. It might still. After the brunch, she walked home slowly, her heels clicking on the pavement like punctuation marks on a thought she wasn't quite ready to say out loud. By the time she got back, Callan was furious. "You missed my panel," he snapped, loosening his tie. "You never told me you needed me there," she replied calmly. "It's implied," he barked. "You're my wife." Celeste said nothing, because he wasn't wrong. But he also wasn't right. Wives weren't ornaments, and she was no longer interested in being one. He stopped talking halfway through dinner, left his plate half-eaten, poured himself a glass of scotch and scrolled through his emails in silence. She cleaned the dishes, put everything away, and sat on the couch, staring out the window. The lights of Manhattan blinked below. She remembered when they used to walk this city together, dreaming, back when ambition hadn't hardened him, back when his laugh was louder and his need for her was honest. Now everything felt like a transaction. One night, he came home late, smelled like cologne that wasn't his, didn't explain where he'd been, didn't apologize, didn't even pretend. She didn't ask. She wasn't afraid of the answer. She was just done playing games she never agreed to start. Later that week, he sent her a calendar invite for a high-profile gala, something for an international tech summit. Black tie, no plus ones, just spouses. The invite listed her name as guest, Mrs. Dravon, not Celise, not co-founder, not strategic advisor, not consultant, just Mrs. It was the smallest thing, but it was the last thing. She accepted the invite. She wore white, not to match him, but to separate. Sleek, simple, floor length, unbranded. She did her hair herself. No stylists, no glam teams. Just clean lines and a strong spine. The event was everything she expected. Media, paparazzi, fake compliments, microaggressions wrapped in champagne. Callan was in his element. He barely touched her hand, only introduced her once. And when one of his investors asked, "What does your wife do these days?" Callan replied, "She enjoys the view." Everyone chuckled. Celise didn't. She didn't correct him. She didn't look embarrassed. She just looked at him and saw everything clearly. He needed her to stay small, quiet, hidden, because if she stood up too tall, she'd block his light. When the night ended, they took the elevator to the rooftop for a private toast. It was something he insisted on doing after every big event. She hated it now. But she went anyway. The sky was cloudy. Wind blew against the glass rails. He raised his glass. "To success," he said. And then, after a pause, "To you, too, Celise." She turned toward him. It wasn't gratitude in her eyes. It was quiet steel. He added, "You've always been reliable, but you've been off lately. Distracted. Building something," she said softly. He laughed. "Just don't let your little hobby get in the way of the real world." She stared at him, and he followed with the line that would echo in her bones for months. "You add no value, Celise." The rooftop went silent, not because of shock, because everyone else already believed it. She stood there for a moment, then said nothing. She just walked away, down the elevator, through the lobby, out the door, and didn't look back. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She wrote one sentence on a piece of paper that night, left it on the kitchen counter the next morning. "I'd rather be invisible building something than silent while you erase me." And she was gone, not for spite, but for breath, for air. For the first step back to herself, the room was golden. Golden light, golden cutlery, golden names. It was the third annual Horizon Gala, held inside the Serafina Ballroom downtown, where tech met politics and billionaires posed beside initiatives they'd never fund past PR season. Celise stepped through the double doors like a ghost in plain sight. No one noticed her at first, which was fine. She preferred it that way. The navy gown she wore had no designer label, no crystals, no trending slit, but it fit her perfectly. Modest, elegant, with a cut that didn't need approval. The kind of dress you wear when you no longer ask permission to be seen. Callan had arrived early. She saw him from across the room, already surrounded by a handful of VCs, and a newly appointed senator who laughed like he owed Callan something. He didn't glance in her direction, and yet she felt the pull, the old reflex to smile, to be useful, to play the wife role like she was still in the business of saving his image. But that part of her had expired quietly. No funeral, just facts. Celise found her assigned table. It was far from the stage, closer to the side doors, and labelled Spouse, Reserved. A folded name card with her married name sat untouched. She flipped it over, wrote on the back with a pen from her clutch, Celise Winter, and placed it in front of her water glass. A few minutes later, a tech reporter named Daviuna Fields recognized her. "Wait, Celise?" she whispered, stunned. "Dravon's wife?" Celise smiled without teeth. "Ex-wife," she said simply, unofficially. "Paperwork takes time." Daviuna blinked, clearly unsure of what to say, then slowly sat next to her. "I used to see you in the background of those launch parties. Always thought you were the one with the brain." Celise laughed lightly. "You weren't wrong." That caught Daviuna off guard. She leaned closer. "Off record, what happened?" Celise's gaze drifted toward Callan, who was now clinking glasses with someone, who'd once called her forgettable in front of a room full of men. "He built a brand," she said calmly, "and decided I didn't match it anymore." Daviuna blinked, then shook her head. "I'd love to interview you, maybe later," Celise replied. "Let him finish his chapter first." The lights dimmed. The music shifted. The keynote speaker stepped onto the stage, flanked by flashing lights and rolling camera drones. Callan took his place behind the podium, smiling as if nothing in his life had ever come with a cost. She listened to the speech. It was beautiful. Empty, but beautiful. He thanked his early mentors, his team, the investors who never gave up on him. Celise was never mentioned, not even a nod. At the end, a soft piano cue signaled applause. She didn't clap. Neither did Daviuna. But the rest of the room roared. She watched Callan wave politely, then shake hands on his way back to the very important person section. A PR assistant guided him to a portrait booth where digital frames floated behind. Him, displaying his product's journey from beta to billion-dollar status. Each image was carefully selected. Not one included her. The irony was almost too poetic. She stood from her table, walked past the champagne bar, past the stage, past the assistant holding a clipboard of seating charts and press timelines. She walked straight to the coat check. The young woman behind the counter blinked. "Already?" Celise smiled. "I was never really here." She retrieved her coat, draped it over her arm, and walked to the exit. On her way out, she passed another wife in a tight red dress, whispering into her phone behind a column. She passed a junior developer from Callan's firm, who stared at her like he was trying to remember where he'd seen her before. She didn't stop. Not for any of them. Outside, the night was colder than expected. The wind pushed against her, like it wanted to make sure she meant it. She did. She walked 2 blocks before calling a cab. Her phone buzzed with a message from Callan's assistant. "You left early. Everything okay?" She didn't reply. She never would. The next morning, her inbox had 12 new requests. 4 podcasts, 1 live event, 7 written interview pitches, all because someone had posted a picture. Daviuna. The caption was simple. "This is Celise Winter, once introduced as just the wife." Tonight, she introduced herself. The photo showed her sitting at the table, flipping her name card, half smile on her lips. It went viral in less than 6 hours. Hashtags exploded. Celise Winter. She was there too, not just the wife. Celise stared at her screen in silence. This wasn't part of the plan. She didn't want fame. She wanted freedom. But something had changed. The comments weren't gossip. They were gratitude. "I remember her face. She was always behind him. I used to think she was just shy. Now I realize she was being erased. She helped build him, and he left her out of the credits." Women from all over began stitching her story into their own. Quiet wives, overlooked interns, former founders, dismissed assistants. Every role society mistook for background noise. That same day, her Rise L beta list doubled. Celise wasn't prepared for any of it, but she didn't hide from it either. She recorded a 2-minute video on her cracked iPhone, sitting in her living room with no makeup and a soft hoodie. She didn't rehearse. She just spoke. "Hi, I'm Celise Winter. You might know me from a picture going around. I wasn't planning to trend, I was just planning to leave. But since we're here, let me be clear, I helped build something for someone who forgot I had value. And when he erased me, I made something for the women who feel that way every day. It's called Rise L. It's not a comeback, it's not a brand, it's a beginning." She posted it, turned off her phone, and went to work. Celise didn't check the view count until 2 days later. By then, her video had passed 3 million. Not from ads, not from sponsors, from shares. Women sent it to each other with captions like, "This is what dignity looks like. I didn't even know her name until now. I'll never forget it. We rise with her. She didn't expect this. She hadn't smiled this much in weeks. Not because of ego, but because every comment confirmed what she already knew in her gut. Her silence hadn't been weakness. It had been survival. And now, her voice didn't shake anymore. She poured the last of her tea into a chipped mug, sat cross-legged on the floor of her apartment, and pulled up her dashboard. The Rise L beta list had exploded. Not with casual browsers, with builders, law students, freelancers, young mothers starting second careers, women in mid-level jobs who wanted more, girls fresh out of high school with startup notes scribbled on paper napkins. And every single one of them had the same request: "Where do I start?" Celise stayed up that night responding personally to 50 of them. She didn't use a script. She wrote each message with the same care she once used editing Callan's investor decks. But this time, the recipients weren't looking for profit. They were looking for possibility. She couldn't stop now. She started hosting free workshops again. No fanfare, no venues with velvet ropes, just folding chairs, borrowed projectors, and a whiteboard that squeaked every time she erased it. Her calendar filled faster than she could keep up. She needed help. But not just any help. Not people chasing the viral moment. People who believed in the mission, quietly, firmly, without needing credit. The first person she thought of was a woman named Letha, who had attended her earliest session months ago. A designer who'd been laid off after returning from maternity leave. Celise emailed her directly. "Within hours," Letha replied. "When do we start?" By the end of the week, the two of them were working in her small living room, surrounded by half-assembled grant folders, color palette sketches, and a whiteboard that had been repurposed from an old tutoring center. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. One afternoon, while reviewing legal structuring options for non-profit, "Hybrid status," Letha said. "We need someone with legal eyes. These clauses are tangled." Celise nodded. "I know a guy." She didn't say more. Didn't have to. His name was Kaya. They'd met once, briefly, at a legal aid booth during a small founders' fair in Bushwick 6 months earlier. He wasn't flashy. No custom cufflinks, no condescending attitude. But he'd asked smart questions, listened, and when the session ended, he'd stayed back to quietly offer feedback to several women who didn't get to speak during the event. He hadn't tried to network. He just helped. Celise found his card tucked in her drawer. She called. "Kaya Alden. It's Celise Winter." He paused, then said warmly, "I was wondering when I'd hear from you." They met at a cafe near Prospect Park. No laptops, no slide decks, just 2 mugs, 1 notebook, and mutual respect. She explained the vision, the surge, the direction she wanted to take Rise L. He listened, then asked, "You trying to sell it in 5 years?" "No," she said. "I'm trying to protect it forever." He smiled. "In that case, let's structure it to survive you." That was the start. Kaya didn't flirt. He didn't push. He didn't perform interest. But when Celise asked about grant compliance terms, he explained with patience. When she forgot to eat, he ordered her food. And when Letha ranted about digital gatekeeping, he said nothing, just handed her a resource pack he'd already printed the week before. He didn't ask for credit. He just kept showing up, in quiet ways that made Celise pause more than once, because it had been so long since someone stood next to her without wanting something in return. Not Callan's polished performance of partnership, but presence, real presence. One evening, after a long work session, Kaya walked her back to her building. The wind was cold. Her hands were shaking. He didn't offer to hold them. He simply waited, until she was steady enough to unlock the door without fumbling. At the threshold, she turned. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" he asked. "For being still," she said softly. "Most people want to steer." "I'm not most people," he said, holding her gaze. And she believed him. She went upstairs and sat on her couch in silence for a while, then opened the app's admin dashboard. She clicked publish on the new version of Rise-L, version 2.1. Cleaner UI, simplified forms, legal structuring built in. It was ready. In a quiet post, she announced it. No capital letters, no branding slogans, just truth. "We don't all get the same doors, but some of us learn how to build new ones. Rise-L 201 is live. Come build." The downloads crashed the servers within 12 hours. She cried, not because of pressure, because of joy, because it was hers now, and it was working. Celise woke before sunrise, not from an alarm, from something deeper. That silent tug in the chest that wakes people building something that didn't exist before they arrived. The city was still dark. Outside her window, the skyline blinked quietly, half asleep. She sat up slowly, feet touching the cold floor, and let the quiet hold her. She didn't feel like a woman who had survived a storm. She felt like a woman who had left one, and now stood in the quiet between chaos and clarity. She walked to the kitchen, made tea, and opened her laptop. The Rise-L dashboard lit up before the sun did. Requests, feedback, questions, applications. The momentum was real now, tangible, but she felt no rush to declare victory. Not yet, because she wasn't doing this to prove a point. She was doing this to build a place that would exist even when she wasn't in the room. She scrolled through user messages. One from a woman in Detroit, starting a meal prep business out of her kitchen. One from a grandmother in Baton Rouge, who said her niece was the first in their family to apply for a grant. One from a girl in Oakland, 16 years old, who downloaded the app, in secret, and whispered, "I didn't know we were allowed to try." Celise stared at that last one for a long time, then replied, "You are. You always were. They just didn't tell you." She hit send. The sun crept in through the blinds. She stood up, stretched her arms, and turned on music. Soft jazz, the kind her mother used to play when cleaning the house on Sundays. There was something sacred in that sound. Not loud, but powerful, like her. She spent the rest of the morning planning. A grant cycle for single mothers. A partnership with a bookstore chain for free space to host in-person sessions. A licensing conversation with a non-profit in Nairobi. Rise-L was no longer just an app. It was becoming an infrastructure, and she had built it. Out of insult, out of silence, out of refusal to stay erased. She paused around noon, walked to her window, and sipped her second cup of tea. That's when her phone buzzed. Not a notification, a call. Unknown number. She let it ring. Then let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, the message came through. She didn't need to play it. She already knew the voice. Callan. She pressed play anyway. "Celise, I heard about the relaunch. I saw your video. Look, I just think maybe we should talk. It's not about us. I mean, okay, maybe it is a little, but it's bigger than that. Maybe there's a way to collaborate, you know? I've got people watching. The timing could be good. We'd look powerful." She didn't finish the message. She didn't need to. He hadn't changed. Not really. He didn't miss her. He missed her image, her contribution, her credibility, now that the public knew her name. She deleted the voicemail, blocked the number, and smiled. Not because she won, but because she no longer needed to explain why she left. That was the real victory. Later that day, she met with Letha and Kaya at a co-working loft they'd just signed a short-term lease for. It wasn't large, it wasn't fancy, but it had clean walls, soft lighting, and a long table where ideas felt at home. They sat down together with printed grant applications, partnership proposals, and a shared calendar scribbled with deadlines. It wasn't a boardroom. It was better. It was theirs. Letha kicked off the meeting with updates on branding outreach. Kaya passed around updated legal documentation for partner collaboration clauses. Celise shared the latest user data growth chart. They weren't building to impress anyone. They were building for impact. At the end of the meeting, Letha packed up and said, "You good?" Celise nodded. "Better than I've been in years." She stayed behind after they left. Let the silence settle around her. She looked around the space, blank walls, chairs with slight scratches. Windows that let in streaks of light no filter could improve. She whispered to the room, "We're just getting started." That night, she walked home instead of calling a car. She passed the spot she used to cry in after investor meetings, the cafe where she used to sit for hours revising Callan's slides, the park bench where she once wondered if she'd wasted her best years on a man who couldn't even remember her middle name. And now? She passed them like old furniture she no longer needed. When she reached her door, a small box was sitting on the ground. No sender listed. She picked it up carefully and opened it inside. Inside, a single frame. Her Rizel login screen, printed clean and framed in black. A post-it stuck to the back. "It's working. Keep going. K." She stared at it for a long time, then hung it on the wall above her workspace. She didn't text him, didn't thank him yet. But when she sat down at her desk and looked up, she felt something she hadn't in years. Affirmed, not for how she looked, or what she represented, but for what she built with her own hands. And she wasn't done. The next morning, Celise opened her inbox to something she hadn't expected. An invitation from the National Women in Tech Forum. Keynote speaker slot. Topic: building from the margins. Her first instinct was to say no. She didn't like stages. She liked frameworks. Quiet execution, fixing systems no one else wanted to touch. But the message was personal, not a blanket email, not a press opportunity in disguise. It read, "We've watched you work for years. Not all of us were silent. Some of us were watching. It would be an honor to have you speak. Signed, Noreen Cho, Chairwoman, Nwithif." Celise stared at the screen, then forwarded the invite to Kaya and Letha. Kaya responded within 5 minutes. "Say yes, but only if it's you up there, not their version of you." That sealed it. She replied, "Yes." The next 2 weeks moved fast. Speech drafts, outfit fittings, coaching calls. She declined politely. Event prep was a machine, and she refused to let it shape her into someone she wasn't. "No slides," she told the coordinator. "No pitch deck, no bio video. Just me." They hesitated, then agreed. On the morning of the event, she woke early. The sky was cloudy but calm. She wore slate grey, sharp lines, no jewelry, just a small pin with the Rizel logo on her lapel. Not flashy, not screaming, just present. She arrived at the venue an hour early. Sound crew, light checks, nervous assistants buzzing through the aisles. Celise walked past them all, straight to the stage. She stood there, alone, staring out at the empty rows. Rows she used to sit in, listening, learning, taking notes on people who never knew her name. Now she was here, center, still. Later, backstage, Letha handed her a small note before the program started. "You don't need to impress them. You already built what most of them are still pretending to." Celise smiled, then walked onto the stage. No announcement, no grand entrance. She just walked. The applause came anyway. Quiet at first, then rising. She stood behind the podium, took a breath, then moved away from it, stepped forward. No cue cards, no confidence coach, just truth. "I was told once that I added no value," she began. The room went still. "I was told that by someone I helped build, and for a long time, I believed him." A beat passed. I believed I needed a title to matter. I believed being behind the scenes was safer. That invisibility was the price of support. She looked across the room. But I was wrong. Applause. Not loud, but honest. She kept going. I didn't come here today because I want a brand, or followers, or even recognition. I came here because there's a girl somewhere, watching this from her cracked phone, wondering if she's allowed to start. A pause. She is. And so are you. The applause was louder now. But let's be clear, she said, voice steady. Starting doesn't mean waiting for permission. Starting means refusing to stay invisible, even when it's more comfortable. A woman in the second row wiped her eyes. Celise looked right at her. You don't owe anyone a polished version of yourself to prove you're worthy of being heard. She ended her talk with a simple line. I didn't walk away to be seen. I walked away to see myself. And I've never looked back. The room stood before she even finished. Standing ovation, not performative. Earned. Afterward, she slipped backstage quickly, trying to avoid cameras. But someone was already there waiting. Kaya, no words. Just him, holding her coat. She took it slowly, still catching her breath. Then he handed her a cup of coffee. Her exact order. 2 sugars, no cream. She smiled. You watched. I listened, he said. She looked up at him. I didn't plan to say most of that. I know. That obvious? No, he replied. It was you. Unfiltered. That's why it worked. They stood in silence for a moment. Then he added, You said something out there. Which part? That you walked away to see yourself. She nodded. That line didn't feel like a metaphor. It wasn't, she said. Another pause. Kaya didn't push. He never did. He just held the coffee a little longer when her hands were too full. They walked together to the lobby. Paparazzi tried to snap shots through the glass doors. Celise turned away. Kaya stepped in front of the lens, not as a shield, but as a message. Not yours. They exited through the side. Wind hit them fast. Celise let it blow her hair out of place. She didn't care. Want a ride? He asked. No, she said. Walk with me. So he did. 3 blocks of silence. Then she asked, You think people change? Really? He looked up. Some evolve. Some stay wrapped in the idea of who they used to be. Which one do you think I am? He stopped walking, faced her. You're not evolving, he said softly. You're already becoming. She didn't say anything at first, but she smiled. It wasn't a perfect smile. It was real. At her door, they paused. She didn't invite him in, but she didn't want to say goodbye either. So she said something else. Thank you. For showing up without asking to be the center. Kaya nodded once and replied, Thanks for making space for someone who didn't come to take. She watched him walk away. Not because she wanted to, because she needed to know he would. That he wasn't trying to fill a gap. He was just willing to stand near it. Inside, she opened her laptop. Rizel's servers were holding steady, user count climbing, feedback glowing. She looked at herself in the screen's reflection. Still in slate grey, still sharp, still standing. She whispered, We're not done yet. And meant it. The message came in the middle of a quiet Tuesday. No subject line. No greeting, just a simple email. You're on the shortlist for Forbes 40 Under 40, social impact category. Can we talk? Celise reread it 3 times, then closed her laptop. She didn't move for a full minute. The dishwasher hummed in the background. Her tea had gone cold. Outside her window, the city rolled on like usual. No applause, no spotlight. That's how she wanted it. And yet, a part of her, the part still healing from being ignored for so long, felt the quiet pulse of something deeper. She wasn't invisible anymore, not just to women like her, but to the very institutions that once dismissed her. She took a breath, reopened the laptop, replied simply, Happy to speak. Let's set a time. She didn't text Letha, didn't call Kaya. Not yet. Some news needed to sit with you first, to test if your heart had truly stopped waiting for permission. That evening she hosted a Zoom session for 300 new Rise L users. The chat was flooding faster than she could moderate. A woman from Arizona shared her story of launching a virtual therapy practice after being denied loans 3 years in a row. A college dropout from Atlanta showed off her eco jewelry line. A teen in DC asked if she could start a Rise L chapter at her school, even if she wasn't old enough to be serious. Celise smiled. Being serious has nothing to do with age, only with vision. They clapped on screen, dozens of small video boxes lighting up in reaction. After the call ended, she sat back and exhaled. It had grown so fast, but it had stayed grounded. That was the win. Latha called 5 minutes later. "I saw the tag," she said. "Forbes?" Celise didn't even ask how she knew. Latha was 3 steps ahead of every algorithm. "It's not confirmed," Celise said. "It's inevitable," Latha replied. Celise didn't argue. She changed the subject. "I want to talk grants. We need a second phase, more flexible options, emergency relocation, legal fund support." "Already sketched it," Latha said. "You think I'm slow?" Celise laughed, but it faded when her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't press. It was him, Callan, not a blocked number, a new one. But she knew his rhythm by now. The message was short. "Saw the shortlist. Proud of you." She stared at it, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. She typed a reply, deleted it, typed again, then put the phone down. Instead, she opened her journal, the one she hadn't touched in months, and wrote one line. "He called me worthless." The world disagreed. 3 days later, the announcement went live. Celise Winter, Forbes 40 under 40, social impact. The article ran her name with bold headlines. Her photo sat beside phrases like tech trailblazer, founder reshaping access, and the quiet mind behind a loud movement. Her phone wouldn't stop. Mentions, DMs, emails. Even her old university reached out asking if they could highlight her legacy. She didn't feel like a legacy. She felt like a woman with 1,000 unread messages and a stubborn server issue she still couldn't fix. That afternoon, she stepped out for air. No makeup, hoodie, braided hair, sunglasses that weren't expensive but helped her think. She walked 3 blocks before stopping at the corner cafe where Kaya sometimes worked between meetings. He was already there, laptop open, black coffee beside it, reading a dense-looking document like it insulted him personally. She stood in front of him without speaking. He looked up and smiled, the kind of smile that didn't change whether the world was clapping or not. "You came out," he said, closing the screen. She nodded. "I needed to remember the city still exists." "You hungry?" She shrugged. He ordered her usual before she answered. They sat together without small talk. He didn't bring up the list. She didn't expect him to. And that's why it meant more than any tweet. After a while, he spoke. "You okay with it?" "With what?" "The spotlight." She exhaled slowly. "I'm okay with the work. The rest is noise." He nodded once. "Good. Then it won't distract you." She tilted her head. "You think I'm distractible?" "No," he said. "But people forget themselves when the world starts clapping. And you worked too hard to lose your own rhythm." That landed. Not harsh. True. She sipped her drink, still hot. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For being consistent. Most people adjust to applause. You don't flinch." He didn't smile this time. He just said, "That's because I'm not here for the applause." A pause stretched between them. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. It was something more dangerous. Safe. She set down her cup. "I think I was waiting for someone to say that. Not with flattery, just honestly. You don't need someone to keep you grounded," he said. "You're already standing, but it's okay to want someone who holds the space beside you." She swallowed, then nodded. They didn't speak for another 5 minutes, but she didn't leave, and he didn't check his watch. "Have you ever been called small by someone who couldn't see your full height?" Celise was told she had no value. But value isn't measured in approval. It's measured in who you lift when no one's watching, and who stands beside you when the crowd finally turns your way. If you've ever risen after being overlooked, drop a comment below. I'm still rising. Like, share, subscribe. Because the quiet ones aren't invisible. They're just focused. And when they speak, the world listens. The downtown office didn't have her name on the door. Not yet. But everyone inside knew who she was. Celise stepped off the elevator and into the small third-floor suite Rizel had recently leased. The walls were still bare. The reception desk hadn't arrived. A cluster of chairs sat huddled near the window, waiting for purpose. But the hum of energy? It was real. Letha waved from across the room. We need your eyes on the partnership contract. The accelerator wants a clause for equity share. Celise raised a brow. We're not giving ownership. That was never the model. I know, Letha replied. But they're dangling global visibility. Celise walked past her, took the file, and sat on the corner of the desk. They're not lifting us. They're attaching themselves to our story, she said flatly. If they believe in the mission, they'll support it without branding it as their redemption project. Letha grinned. That's a quote. Celise didn't smile, not because she was angry, because she meant it. When people began to notice Rizel, the tone shifted. At first it was curiosity, then respect. Now it was strategic interest. But Celise wasn't here to sell visibility. She was here to build power structures women could own. Later that afternoon, she reviewed 3 more grant submissions and drafted the outline for an upcoming resource hub partnership with a law firm in Chicago. She worked until her back ached. Then she walked to the small kitchenette where Kaya had left a note taped to a box of tea. Drink this before 7 or you won't sleep. She shook her head, smiling despite herself. He was right. She poured hot water, waited, then returned to her desk and opened a new email. It was a request from a well-known national magazine. They wanted to do a profile, but the pitch rubbed her the wrong way. We love a good comeback. From forgotten wife to fierce founder, your journey is cinematic. She sighed. They still didn't get it. This wasn't a comeback story. She never left. She had been working the entire time. Quietly, precisely, just not in their spotlight. She deleted the message, wrote a new post instead. Short, unapologetic. We don't need comeback stories. We need continuity. We never stopped. You just weren't looking. By the end of the day, it had over 80,000 shares. She didn't look at the comments. She had work to do. 2 weeks later, the invitation arrived. A sealed envelope, hand-delivered. No subject line, just a soft grey card with her name in silver. Celise opened it slowly, expecting another speaking request or a board opportunity, but her breath stilled when she read the heading. Dravon Technologies, 5-year Founders Gala. The card was thick, heavy, the kind designed to feel expensive even before it was read. The message was short, formal. We'd be honored to welcome you as a special guest to celebrate the visionaries behind our global journey. Your early support and contribution will always be part of our story. There was no signature, but the meaning was clear. Callan wanted her in the room, not as a partner, as a prop. Celise set the card down on her desk and stared at it. 5 years ago, she'd pulled all-nighters so he could get to that first pitch meeting on time, cleaned up his slides, memorized every metric so he wouldn't blank on stage. Now, he was extending an invitation like it was goodwill. She picked up the card again, then laughed, not bitter, amused. Letha walked in, sipping a smoothie. What's funny? Celise held the card up. Letha took one look and groaned. Please tell me we're framing that and not attending. Celise raised a brow. You don't think I should go? I think if you go, it's for you, not for him. That's the line. Celise leaned back in her chair. She didn't speak right away. I'm not mad anymore, she said. Not even hurt. I just want to look him in the face and let him feel what presence looks like when it's no longer asking to be noticed. Letha smirked. Then go. But don't wear rage. Wear clarity. Celise nodded. I'll go. That night, she sat on her balcony. Quiet city noise below. Tea in hand. Eyes on the skyline she'd once cried beneath. She wasn't going to confront anyone. She wasn't going to reclaim space. She already had both. She just wanted to be in that room, fully herself, so that if Callan looked at her, he would see it clearly. The thing he once dismissed as no value was now untouchable. Not because it was loud, because it no longer waited to be proven. The gala was held at the same hotel where it all unraveled. Larkspur, same glass rooftop, same curated lighting, same illusion of exclusivity. Celise hadn't been back since the night he told her she added no value. But this time, she walked in without hesitation, no borrowed power, no supporting role. Her hair was pulled back in a clean twist. Her gown was midnight blue, elegant but unbranded. She wore no jewelry except for a small gold pin on her chest. The Rise L emblem. Let them Google it. She arrived alone, refused the escort. As she entered the lobby, the doorman nodded slowly, recognizing her. She returned the gesture. Inside, the air smelled like citrus and pride. Guests stood around sipping wine, half laughing, eyeing one another with the kind of measured admiration that didn't come from genuine respect, but positioning. She was approached within seconds. Celise? She turned. It was Marisol Bell, one of the original founding PR partners. Marisol's eyes widened. Wow. You look incredible. It's been, what, 3 years? Almost, Celise said. We always wondered what happened to you after. She stopped, realizing her words were thin ice. Celise didn't rescue her. I built something, she said simply. Marisol blinked. I heard. The app, right? Congrats. That Forbes thing? Huge. Celise nodded once. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need validation. She already knew what she'd done. As she moved further into the room, conversations paused when people caught sight of her. Not everyone knew her name, but enough did. And the ones who didn't recognize something else, control. She wasn't in the room to perform. She was the room's reminder that not every presence needed a spotlight to shift the air. At the far end of the rooftop, near the gold-lit podium, she saw him. Callan, sharp suit, perfect posture, surrounded by a half-moon of men clapping him on the back. He hadn't seen her yet, but he would. She walked to the open bar and ordered sparkling water. The bartender handed it over without small talk. She turned, and there he was, face to face. Callan froze, only for a breath. Then, a practiced smile. Celise. She looked at him. Not through him. At him. Callan, you look. He faltered. She waited. He reset. You got the invite. I did. I'm glad you came. She took a sip. I didn't come for you. The smile on his face held, but something behind his eyes cracked. And she let the silence do what it always had, say everything he didn't know how to hear. Callan gestured to a quieter corner of the room. She followed, not because he led, but because she was done running from anything with his name on it. They stood by the glass edge of the rooftop. The city stretched beneath them. She remembered the last time she stood in this exact spot. The rain, his words, her silence. Tonight, no storm, just air, and the space she made for herself. I didn't expect you to say yes, he said, adjusting his cufflink. You don't know me anymore, she replied. His lips curved, but it didn't reach his eyes. You're right. She turned her body fully toward him. You wanted me here for optics? He hesitated. Not only. Then why? He sighed, glancing away. Because I realized you were part of the beginning. And I think people would respect seeing us both tonight, like a full circle moment. Celise laughed once, softly. You still think visibility is the same as value? His brows tightened. That's not fair. No, she said. What's not fair is erasing someone and then inviting them back to decorate your legacy. Callan stiffened. I never erased you. You introduced me as your wife while quoting my research. You used my models, my data. my credit. And when the funding came in, I was listed as a dependent. You know it wasn't personal, he said. That's the problem, she said. You didn't even think it was. The silence between them was sharper than any insult. He rubbed the back of his neck. I watched your interview last week. The keynote. She didn't respond. You were good, he added. Clear. Measured. I wasn't performing, she said. That's what it looks like when someone speaks without needing to convince the room they belong. Callan looked at her for a long moment. I never said thank you. No, she said. You didn't. He swallowed. So, thank you. Celeste tilted her head. I don't need that from you. Not anymore. You gave me something better. What? Permission to leave, she said. I owe you nothing. Not bitterness. Not grace. I just wanted to stand in this room, and know I didn't fade. She stepped back. You thought you built something without me. I built something without you. We're even now. He didn't try to follow. He just stood there, watching her walk away. And this time, she didn't look back. Not out of defiance. Out of peace. The morning after the gala, Celeste didn't wake up exhausted. She woke up lighter. No nightmares. No memory loops. No second-guessing. She made her tea slowly, listening to the sound of the water boil, the faint traffic below her window. For once, her phone wasn't the first thing she reached for. By noon, she was back in the Rizal office. Letha had already posted a recap thread on social media, cryptic, powerful, and unapologetic. She walked into the room they once told her she didn't belong in. She didn't reclaim it. She redefined it. The comments flooded in. But Celeste wasn't focused on praise. She was reviewing funding reports and user feedback when Kaya walked in, 2 folders under his arm and coffee in hand. You left the gala without telling me, he said. She looked up. I told you I wasn't there for the pictures. Fair. But next time, maybe let me know before you ghost. She smirked. Noted. He handed her the folders. Legal updates on the partnership structure, and a new grant opportunity from a women's tech initiative in Berlin. They want to syndicate the Rizal model. She raised an eyebrow. That's fast. It's coming, he said simply. Celeste flipped through the folder but paused when she reached the final page. A clause marked in red. They wanted naming rights. Of course they did. She closed the file. I'm not franchising this. They're offering 7 figures, Kaya said. I don't care. He didn't argue. Just nodded. Then let's draft the no in writing. She leaned back in her chair. I built this from the floor. I'm not letting anyone polish it until it stops reflecting what it was meant to be. Kaya tilted his head. You're allowed to scale without selling out. I know, she said. But I want to scale with intention, not with headlines. There was a beat of silence. Then he said, I know I said it before, but I'm proud of you. Not for the keynote, or the list. For how you've held the line. Celeste looked at him, softer now. Thank you for seeing the line. He started to speak, but her phone buzzed. She picked it up. The name made her pause. Noreen Cho, chairwoman of the Women in Tech Forum. She answered. Noreen's voice was calm, direct. I'd like to nominate you for an advisory position. It's not for press, it's for power. Say yes only if you want to shape policy from inside the room. Celeste didn't blink. Send the details, she said, and hung up. Not to hesitate, to focus. She didn't need more attention. She was building authority now. The following week felt different, not louder, sharper. Everywhere Celeste went, people paid closer attention. Panel invitations, brand offers, collab requests from celebrities who hadn't mentioned her work a month ago. But she said no to most of them. Not because she wasn't honored, because Rizal wasn't created to make her famous. It was created to make space. For the woman in a small town with no mentor. For the single mom running a side hustle from her kitchen. For the girl who heard that's not realistic too many times before 18. And she wasn't about to let a few headlines dilute that mission. Still, there were some moves she couldn't ignore. The Women in Tech Forum nomination was now public. Press releases went out. Her inbox tripled overnight. But in the middle of all the noise, A different email caught her attention. It was from someone named Isha, an administrator at a juvenile detention center in Philadelphia. The subject line, "Rise L changed our girls." Celise clicked it immediately. Inside, Isha explained how a volunteer had introduced Rise L's mentorship materials during weekend sessions. Several girls had begun building business plans. One had applied for a micro-grant with help from her counselor. "They're dreaming again," Isha wrote. "They don't just want to leave the center, they want to lead something when they do." Celise blinked hard, then stood up and left the office without saying a word. She needed air. She walked for blocks, head down, coat unzipped, not to clear her head, to ground it. Because that one email, mattered more than all the awards combined. By the time she got home, she already had a plan forming in her mind. A pilot program, one city at a time. Not for press, not for politics, for girls no one had invested in before. She texted Letha and Kaya a single line. "We're going deeper, not wider. Let's build for them." No questions came back, only a thumbs up and a ready. That night, she stared at the Rise L logo glowing on her screen. She thought about the silence that started this journey, and the roar it had become, not from her, but from the voices that had found each other through what she created. She wasn't just a founder anymore. She was a builder of belonging, and she was just getting started. Celise stood in the middle of a room filled with women she once only dreamed of reaching. They weren't celebrities, not founders or influencers. They were mentors, grant recipients, chapter leads, each one representing a piece of Rise L's expanding world. Some wore suits, others wore hoodies, a few had babies on their laps, and every single one of them had built something from nothing. Celise hadn't called this summit for press. There were no cameras, no keynote screens, no branded backdrops. Just a circle of chairs, not rows. No hierarchy. She stood with a whiteboard and a marker. "This isn't about how to grow Rise L," she said. "It's about how to give it away, without losing its roots." A woman in the back raised her hand. "You mean, give it away like open source?" "No," Celise said. "I mean, open power." The term hung in the air. She wrote it on the board. "Rise L isn't mine anymore," she continued. "Not entirely. It belongs to every hand that held it when no one was looking. So the next phase isn't just expansion, it's distribution." That day, they didn't build a new business model. They drafted a framework of shared authority, regional councils, peer-led review panels, rotating advisory boards led by community members, not donors. Celise didn't lead the entire conversation. She asked questions, listened, took notes. By the end, she sat back, exhausted but fulfilled. Kaya walked in near the end of the session, leaned against the wall, and watched without interrupting. Later, as the chairs were being folded and the chatter dimmed, he approached her quietly. "You know what this is?" he asked. She looked at him. "A movement," he said. "No," she replied. "Movements fade. This is a model." Kaya smiled. "That's why it'll last." They left together in the quiet of early evening. Not touching, not rushing, side by side. As they reached her building, she turned to him. "I used to think I had to hold everything myself to keep it pure. And now? Now I know purity means nothing without people." Kaya didn't reply with words. He just nodded, once, like an agreement made without needing to speak. Inside, Celise sat alone with the notes from the summit. She circled 2 words. Legacy structure. It was time. Not to lead louder, to lead wider. By Friday, Celise had her legal team on a call. Not to talk scale, to talk succession. "This isn't about stepping down," she clarified. "It's about stepping aside. Eventually, when the time is right. I want the transition plan in place now, not later." The call went silent for a second. Then Kaya's voice cut through calmly. "We'll draft a dual structure proposal, split between governance board and mission council. Power rotates. No one becomes the center, including you." Celise nodded slowly. "That's the point," She knew what happened when vision got trapped inside one name. Callan had built Dravon Technologies in his image, and when that image cracked, the entire structure trembled. Celise wasn't going to make that mistake. She printed the draft of her original Rise-L framework, the one she scribbled on loose paper in a borrowed workspace. At the bottom of the first page, she added one new sentence in pen. "The founder is not the finish line." Later that evening, Letha walked into the office with 2 mugs of hot cocoa and a smirk. "You're planning your own obsolescence," she teased. "I'm planning our permanence," Celise said. Letha sat across from her, serious now. "You know what's wild?" she said. "This didn't start with branding, or capital, or clout. It started with pain, and you turned it into architecture." Celise looked up. "You think it'll hold?" "I think it already is." They clinked mugs. No toast, no big words, just warmth. That weekend, Celise flew to Philadelphia to meet Isha and the girls at the detention center. No press, no announcements, just chairs, journals, printed workbooks. She spoke to them the same way she spoke to the board, with respect. One girl, maybe 16, raised her hand near the end. "You ever feel like people only see you when you're angry or shining? Like they don't notice the middle?" Celise looked at her and nodded. "All the time," she said. "But the middle's where the real power grows." The girl blinked, then wrote that down. Later, before Celise left, Isha pulled her aside. "You didn't come here with cameras," she said. "I don't build for exposure," Celise replied. "I build for echoes." As her car pulled away from the center, she watched the girls wave from behind the glass doors, and she whispered to herself, "They see it now, not her, themselves." The award wasn't why she showed up, but the moment they called her name, the room went still. Celise Winter, founder of Rise-L, architect of equity innovation, builder of tomorrow. She rose from her seat in a sleek charcoal gown, no designer flaunting, no diamonds screaming status, just clean lines and steady grace. The applause didn't explode. It built, like people had just realized they were clapping for someone who changed the ground they stood on. Kaya stood too, but not out of obligation. He didn't cheer loudly. He just looked proud, solid, present, and that meant more than the plaque waiting on stage. As she walked toward the podium, her old life flashed quietly in her steps. The room where she once stood behind Callan, silent during his acceptance speeches. The office where she sat on the floor with budget notes, unacknowledged. The silence she swallowed while being underestimated. Now she was here, not louder, clearer. She took the mic and looked at the crowd. "Thank you. I accept this with gratitude, and with a challenge." A few heads tilted. "I built Rise-L because I was told I couldn't, because I was labeled supporting caste, because people said worth had a look, a gender, a pedigree." Her voice didn't rise. It deepened. "We've built a company that lifts women from the sidelines to the strategy table. But this isn't the peak, it's the door. If this award is our applause, then let the next steps be accountability." She held their gaze. "And to every woman watching, if someone once called you just a wife, good, let them. Then turn that name into a brand, a platform, a legacy they'll have to spell correctly." The room erupted. This time, the applause was loud. Kaya smiled without blinking, because he already knew. The world had caught up to what he saw long ago. Later, when the cameras were done flashing and the hall began to empty, a familiar figure approached. Callan. No cameras followed him. No reporters cared anymore. But his eyes still held the same sharpness. Not ego, regret. "Congratulations," he said, voice tight. "Thank you," Celise said evenly. He hesitated. "I saw the keynote," he added. "You've built something massive." "I built something quietly," she corrected. "That's the difference." He nodded. "I was wrong." Celise tilted her head slightly. "About what?" His jaw flexed. "About what matters. About what—" I let go. She didn't smile. "Good men don't realize too late," she said. Then she walked away. No mic drop. No final word. Just her back turned, with the world behind her this time. The next morning, the article ran front page in the Business Daily. From footnote to founder, Celise Winter shifts the future. Kaya slid the paper across the counter to her at breakfast. She glanced at the headline, then back at her tea. "You didn't smile," he noted. "I did," she said softly, "just not with my face." She had no interest in headlines. The world could write what it wanted. She had rewritten herself. Across the city, in an office once filled with noise and glory, Callan stared at the same paper. He didn't throw it away. He folded it, slowly, then placed it on the shelf where her photo used to be. Some lessons arrive softly. Others arrive like thunder, even when the storm is already over. Callan had learned his. He had built his kingdom out of mirrors and thought it was marble. She had built hers from silence, and it still stood. Meanwhile, at Rizal headquarters, a new class of young female innovators filed into the mentorship room. Celise stood at the head of the circle. No stage, no mic, just her voice. "I'm not here to tell you what to do," she began. "I'm here to remind you what you already know." The room hushed. She continued. "You'll be told that you're being emotional, that your instincts aren't data, that your voice is better soft. Let them talk." She looked around. "Then build something so solid they'll need your permission just to enter." A single mother raised her hand. "What if we don't feel ready?" Celise smiled for real this time. "Then you're right on time." The girl nodded slowly. Because that's what Celise had needed years ago. Not permission. Affirmation. Not long after, Kaya picked her up outside the building. She slipped into the car, unbothered by the guards, the cameras, or the curious eyes outside. In her world now, privacy was earned. Power wasn't paraded. It was practiced. He glanced at her. "You gave them your all again today." "No," she corrected. "I gave them truth. My all belongs to the people who see me outside the stage." His hand found hers. Firm. Certain. "And when you're done building for them, what about you?" he asked gently. She looked out the window. The skyline she once felt small beneath now felt like hers. "I'm still building," she said. Kaya leaned closer. "Then let's build together." They didn't kiss. Not yet. Some moments don't ask for that. Some moments close with quiet. Celise leaned her head against his shoulder as they drove, not toward fame, but toward peace. And this time, when she looked in the mirror, she didn't see a wife left behind. She saw the empire she'd become. They said she wasn't enough. They measured her by silence, mocked her with titles, and left her to rebuild from ruins. But what they forgot was that some women don't break. They rise. Celise Winter was called worthless, but she built a company from her name, a vision from her pain, and a future no one could take credit for but her. So here's your reminder. If someone ever counts you out, you don't argue. You don't beg. You build. Build in silence. Build in setbacks. Build in the shadows until the day they need your light to see their own way forward. Because success doesn't always sound loud. Sometimes it sounds like the click of a door you locked behind you and never opened again. And if you've ever been called too soft, too emotional, or too late, you are not behind. You are being sharpened, and when you step forward, it will be with purpose no one can deny. If this story reminded you of your own worth, comment "I build quietly." Like this video. Subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories and share it with someone who's rising in silence. Because we don't clap for the loudest. We clap for the ones who never gave up, even when no one was watching.